You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, there are listening to the Mix Official. Welcome to the big show. For 16 years, 24 episodes, we've been the Chris Voss Show, and we just keep bringing you more of the most smartest, brightest people in the world. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss won the TikTok and all those crazy places on the interwebs in the sky. Today, we have an amazing young lady on the show with us today. Her newest book comes out August 5th, 2025. It is called Cleaning House, The Fight to Rid Our Homes of Toxic Chemicals by Lindsay Dahl. And we're going to be excited to talk about this because I'm always interested in cleaning up my environment because, I don't know, I should probably dust around here or bathe more often. Anyway, guys, we have Lindsay Dahl on the show. She is a nationally awarded environmental health and consumer safety expert. Over the last 20 years, Dahl has helped pass over 30 state and federal laws that remove toxic chemicals from consumer products and our environment. She hasn't gotten me yet. There's still time, probably. Her activism and writing has been featured in the New York Times, Fast Company, and Vogue, among other publications, and she's worked across leadership positions for environmental health, nonprofits, including Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families, and for leading consumer brands. Welcome to the show, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Are you here because you heard I was a toxic chemical from my exes, and you're here to clean it up?
Yeah, that's actually how you were top of the list because of that.
That's what I thought. That's my last 8 divorces. So anyway, so Lindsay, give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me at lindsaydahl.com and also on Substack.
So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your new book?
I have worked, as you mentioned, for the last 20 years, working to get toxic chemicals out of consumer products in our homes. And I decided to write the book Cleaning House because more and more people, even though there's been a lot of great movement on this topic, more and more people I'm finding still don't know that there are toxic chemicals that are in our homes every single day. And the conversation about this topic on social media has gotten really complicated. So it's hard to suss out fact from fiction. People don't know if it's all fear mongering or if there's any real science behind this. And I kind of wanted to set the record straight and let people know what are things they should be concerned about, which things they shouldn't be, and how they can take action.
And is there some stats on, I don't know, what the average toxic chemicals people have in their home percentage, or is there some stats you can throw at us on what's going on out there?
Yeah. So if you kind of take a walk through your home, there in every single room, there are kind of top offenders. So think about things like if you have a couch that was made before 2015, which especially couches stay in people's homes for a long time, it is likely made with toxic flame retardants, which sound like a good thing. These are different chemicals that are used by the pound to treat the polyurethane foam that we all watch movies on. The problem is that these chemicals have been shown to not really slow the spread of fires. And they're also linked to a bunch of different toxic health effects. So we're talking of things like cancer, harming our hormone systems and whatnot. Same holds true for our beauty products and the cookware that we have in our kitchens. And this is all a result of a lack of federal laws that really make sure that chemicals are safe long before they get into our consumer products. What I try to do in my book, Cleaning House, is to kind of help people understand. We think that someone has to make sure that this is all safe before it ends up on the shelf. In some industries and instances, that is true. In some, it is not. So I try to kind of guide people through, in some cases where the United States is far behind other countries, and other things where you actually don't need to worry about it. And it is just fear mongering. And you can scratch that off of your to-do list.
I thought it's not toxic if you lobby and bribe a politician to make it so it's allowed in products. Is that? I guess that isn't true.
It's funny, Chris. So a lot of this could be a very dry topic, but what I do is I actually tell the story firsthand through my career. And I've been lobbying for these bills for decades, and I've gone toe to toe with the chemical industry. And in the early days, this is a reference that people who are maybe over the age of 40 will understand. My mom was like, I don't understand what you do for a job. And I was like, I'm going to give you two movies that are kind of reference points. Thank You for Smoking. That's who I'm up against. And if Erin Brockovich was like, someone who's fighting to get toxic chemicals out of the wells in her backyard, that's what we as a community are trying to do. And so she's like, oh, I kind of get it. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, look, the chemical industry is making a lot of chemicals that are safe. And they're also making a lot of chemicals like forever chemicals. They're called PFAS. They're putting our rain jackets in our cars and the cookware in our homes. And they're profiting. They're making billions of dollars every single year. And they're not going to take those products off the market until they're forced to.
Yeah. Isn't it wild, some of the stuff that we do with products? I mean, you go back and you look at, I remember I was in Chicago one time, and I was in an offbeat area of Chicago, so it wasn't in Chicago. I don't want people writing me going, it's in Chicago. It was somewhere, I don't know, an hour out of Chicago. I was going to a friend's wedding, to best man for his wedding, and boy, that worked out. A year later, and there was a factory that had been there that had, if I recall rightly, it had been the watch factory where the women would paint on I forget what it was, but it was nuclear, the atomic. They would paint on the glow in the dark paint for the things.
The radium girls.
Uranium. Yeah. And then you see the faces of those girls and how it ate their face because they would lick the brush to make it apply better or something along those lines. And, you see stuff like that, the Foster Grant stuff, the Foster Grant leftover lesions, like that whole area that was out by a Foster Grant plant I remember seeing years ago had tons of children that were born with medical issues. And, I grew up in the 70s. So, we saw the flames in rivers and, Love Canal. The Love Canal whole thing. I mean, I watched Jimmy Carter, create the EPA. But it's so funny that we still have this crap going on now. Well, I'm 57, so we still have, I actually like the forever chemicals in the Teflon pans, because if you scrape the pan just right, you get a little bit of that mixed with your eggs, gives that nice spicy flavor.
Yeah, I think, Chris, you're like, all joking aside, you are right. A lot of people thought that, back in the 70s was when things were bad, and now everything's been taken care of. And what I think a lot of what I'm trying to do in this book is to say, look, not all chemicals are toxic. Many are. They are in our homes, and it's not, just about polluting and rivers, bursting in flames, but it's about our exposure every single day. And guess what? If those exposures didn't matter and scientists weren't concerned, we might not have a problem on our hands. But the problem is we've got 4 decades of really strong peer-reviewed research. We've got major organizations like American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, American Nurses Association, that have all been really outspoken to say, look, we've got to do something about this. And so we've got a strong body of science. We still have a problem with toxic chemicals in our air, water, and our products. And the good news is that over the last 20 years in my short career, we've seen a tremendous amount of state and federal laws that have started to turn off the tap, get these things out of products. And when I was starting in my early days, I was working to ban BPA from baby bottles, for example. It was like, there's going to be a shortage of baby bottles. No one's going to be able to feed their children. And guess what? There's plenty of other materials, different types of safer plastics, glass that are available. And the markets have really responded and shifted to those new laws. And now people don't have to think about it when they go to shop for a baby bottle or buy something for someone's nursery about exposing their child to BPA. Consumer choices matter, but to your point, we've got a long way to go. And I want people to really understand that there's a lot of work left to be done, and it is possible.
Yeah. I don't know if you get into this in the show or in your book and stuff, but one of the things we had an author several years ago come on that talked about parabens and estrogenics and different things being in our soaps and other things. I know that it used to make me sick. It used to bug me all my life. It's always bugged me if any one of my girlfriends uses one of those fabric softeners in the thing.
Yep.
I can't handle that. That fucks with me. That messes with me somehow.
Yep.
And then I didn't realize with parabens and other things, it's basically freaking wax, and that's all that thing is a piece of wax that just waxes your clothes to make them softer. But it's not the best for you. In fact, for a lot of young women, it's been giving them it's starting their periods much earlier because there's so much estrogen in our chemical systems and, soaps and all this kind of crap. Same thing with men where, we've seen testosterone dropping precipitously. And then the other thing I found out is lavender is pretty poisonous in the chemical version of what they use in like candles. And, my mom would always have these candles on, and then she'd have those plug-in things where you plug it in, it burns the scent and puts it in the air. And, it sound pretty. That stuff would screw with me, man.
Yeah.
I can't have it around me in my house.
Yeah.
And so talk about some of that if you want.
Yeah. So here's what's going on. We'll start with fragrances for the first. Fragrances are made up of not just like lavender, rose, etc. There are different chemical compounds that are kept secret from consumers, and by law, companies, whether they are creating that plug-in in your home or in personal care and beauty products, lots of things are fragranced. But if you flip over the label, by law, they don't have to tell you which ingredients are in there.
Wow.
Again, that wouldn't be a problem if there weren't actual problematic chemicals and ingredients that are used in fragrances. So some fragrance blends have up to 300 different ingredients. And the kind of biggest offenders that are commonly found are a class of chemicals called VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Those are the ones that often are giving people headaches. There's also a class of a bunch of different allergens. So some people break out in rashes or have dermal reactions. And then the final category are phthalates, which are chemicals that are used to bind the fragrance to our skin. So you gave the example of the fragrance, like the softening, dryer sheets that are used. Those have phthalates. And the reason you can pull a sweater off the shelf 2 weeks later and it still smells really strong is because a class of chemicals called phthalates. Now, phthalates are something I cover in my book. I actually interviewed one of the top scientists, Dr. Shauna Swan, on phthalates, who found the first connection between increased phthalate levels in Pregnant women and deformities of the reproductive tract, especially for boys. So she really looked at how these exposures have real meaningful impacts to our lives. And that's just one category of fragrances. And so I think one of the things is there are so many safer alternatives on the market. I give people actionable tips at the end of my book to be able to know how to prioritize what's in your home. Because when people learn about this, Chris, they start to freak out and they start to think that they can shop their way to safety. And the reality is that we see a lot of researchers like using phthalates, where when people stop using these products in their homes, whether it's food packaging or fragrances, we actually see the levels of those phthalates decrease in their bodies is in as short as 3 days. So University of Berkeley, Duke, a bunch of different universities have been doing research to show that removing these toxic chemicals can have a meaningful impact in actually lowering your levels.
Is it possible they're making more people stupid? I don't know if you've been on Twitter lately, but
it's so one of the things I actually talk about is that one of the most toxic things in our homes are these social media algorithms that are basically pushing alarming content. So if you've got one side that I call the perfectionists, it's people that on social media are saying things like, I want lead-free lipstick, things that are kind of overstating science or things that aren't possible. And then the other side, you've got these dismissers, I call, who are saying, don't believe any of this garbage about toxic chemicals. Everything's safe. It's fine. And the reality is that the truth lives somewhere in between. And so I think the role that social media plays is actually directly related to this is a complicated topic. You can't
Yeah.
summarize it in, 15-second TikToks all the time. And what is happening is people are either getting unnecessarily alarmed by this topic, or they're shrugging their shoulders and saying, none of that matters.
I had the guest on the show who wrote this book. I think it was called Estrogenics, if people want to look it up. And he talked about parabens and how it was affecting, and I was about probably 44 or 54 at the time. And so, I'm older, but I was kind of noticing a fall off of my testosterone, part of that's due to age. And so he says, here's the stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll try your little thing here, And I was kind of, just kind of like, yeah, whatever. Okay, well, we'll see what this does. So I bought a bunch of non-paraben stuff that he recommended, shampoo, soaps. I think there was something else, shaving cream and stuff. And I was kind of like, wow, this stuff's in everything. Okay. And so I used it for about, 2 or 3 weeks, and then I ran out of it. And so I was like, oh crap, I got to order more of the non-paraben stuff. So I ordered off of Amazon, and in the day or two, I'm like, oh, well, I still have that old soap and shampoos underneath the sink. I'll just use those. And so, yeah, I bathe daily, people. The earlier joke, don't call me. So I used the soap and the shampoo, and I came out of the shower, and my hands felt like I dipped them in paraben wax and then pulled them out. Like it felt like there was a shell on my hands of wax. And I was like, what the hell? And my hair was waxy. And I was like, I don't feel clean at all. And it took me 6 washes to wash off that crap in my hands, off my hands. And try and get it off. And that's when I went, holy crap, there is something to this. And the same thing with my hair, like just trying to get rid of it and out of it. I'm sure it made my hair wonderfully shiny, like the lead in lipstick, it gives you that beautiful shiny thing. So especially if you add asbestos too, that makes it shine even more. I learned that from watching Popcorn Ceilings as a kid. What else should people know that you tease out in your book and you talk about in your book? I think
the biggest thing that I want people to understand is that like everything, things are getting really politicized, and I think there's room and space for everyone, regardless of political party, to support common sense limits to toxic chemicals with consumer products. I've worked in a bipartisan fashion my whole career, from people from the deep South to, the inner city of San Francisco. And I think there are very few issues that people can really rally behind and kind of agree on. And not wanting to be poisoned in our drinking water, our air, and our products is something that most people agree on. And even though things are getting dicey and everything feels politicized, it actually gives me a lot of hope, knowing that we have made so much progress. So, for example, I worked for 10 years to help pass the first federal updates to our cosmetic safety laws, the first that had happened since 1938. FDR at the time had signed into law those. And this happened just a year and a half ago, when Congress was still just as kind of, bitterly partisan as it is right now. And I think if we can, as individuals, come together, hold our elected officials accountable, and show that there is a united movement of people that really want to make sure that they don't have to think about this. Like I said earlier, this is of our long to-do list, thinking about which pan to cook our eggs on, or which carpet to replace your home, or kind of you shouldn't have to have more money in order to afford a couch that isn't toxic to you and your family. I think there is a lot of power that we have if we roll up our sleeves, put our politics aside, and hold our elected officials accountable. And I think there's a community and communities that I talk about in the book that also help connect people to what's in their home, to where those chemicals are made right here in the United States. So a lot of these petrochemical facilities are here in the United States, and we've got what are called fence line communities. So communities that live in close proximity. So it's called Cancer Alley in Louisiana, for example. Wow. It's a long string of chemical and plastics manufacturing facilities, and the cancer risk for those communities, who are often low income and also communities of color, is extraordinary compared to their white counterparts all across the United States. So maybe something like toxic flame retardants and a black spatula isn't going to really make that much of a difference for you. But guess what? Communities here in the United States are really exposed. And so I think of all the noisiness, I really want people to kind of not only connect the dots between what they purchase and what it means for the entire life cycle of a product. What does it mean for people who live next to the incinerators that burn the trash from our homes, including a lot of plastics? And once we start to ask smarter questions, I believe, as we have seen, we'll start to be a little bit healthier.
Definitely. Now, these forever chemicals, they kind of freak me out because forever chemicals. And then what is this? Micro beads, micro plastics?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, they're good on Wheaties, but no, they're not, folks. I'm just teasing. But don't put them on your Wheaties either. I buy a bag of them from Amazon and eat them by the fistful. But no, but seriously, jokes aside, I can see myself just anyway. I probably do that with popcorn that I shouldn't be eating either too. Caramel popcorn, that is. Stop me before I segue again. Is there any way for me to get rid of these? I think I've heard of people trying to do blood transfusions to get rid of some forever chemicals and crap.
This is where things get into the anti-science category.
Okay.
There's a lot of detox diets, a lot of stuff. Honestly, Chris, the majority of it's all snake oil, and I do not recommend it.
Okay.
The best thing you can do is to avoid exposure where you can upfront. But guess what? Here's the deal. If you think about someone who was born in the late 70s, for example, if you look at when we banned DDT, the toxic pesticide that you may remember, Agent Orange, people that have been born after a lot of these pollutants have been removed from the market still have them in their body, right? So that should be alarming to us. But also, you cannot control your weight. You can't live in a bubble. That's not what we're suggesting here, nor is that what I suggest in my book. The reality of the fact is the best thing you can do for your body is to focus on things like drinking a lot of water, eating healthy fruits and vegetables, getting exercise. Those are like natural detox pathways for your body. We have organs that help us detoxify a lot of these things, and trying to prevent as much new exposures in your home. So the simplest tip I have for people is to buy half of the amount of stuff that they currently purchase. If you think about how much we buy, so much more stuff than we did 10, 15 years ago, it is alarming. And a lot of that is because it's easy. You can have a click of a button, something can be on your doorstep a day or two later. So save yourself some money and also reduce your exposure to toxic chemicals by buying less things. Second, you can check out the action section in the back of my book that gives people real consumer tips at varying price points to help them shop the market in a way that will ultimately protect your family. And then the third is make sure you're calling your state and federal elected officials to say, I need you to get serious about microplastics. I need you to help ban PFAS, forever chemicals, outright, because we had the ability to do that for other large classes of chemicals like lead in children's toys. You know, just 15 years ago, there weren't limits on lead in children's toys, and now there are. That was because people picked up the phone because they were pissed off because there was lead in Thomas the Tank Engine toys. So again, we have the ability to be able to move both our elected officials and also the market away from some of these toxic hazards.
Good. What I don't mean to drag you in the political spectrum because we're trying to get into too much political here unless it's a political book. Are we moving forward with this new administration in 2025 with Donald Trump, second term? It seems like they're unraveling a lot of environmental protections. One was like black lung environmental protections for coal miners and different things. It seems like we're kind of really, it's just we're going the wrong way. What are your thoughts on that, or do you want to comment?
Yeah, no, I can speak to that. I think, look, regardless of if someone likes president or not, you should still be able to hold that president and their cabinet accountable. And what I see is the facts before us is that major pieces of legislation that I and many organizations that I feature in the book have helped pass are actively being rolled back. So the latest is asbestos. You know, the Asbestos Disease Awareness Organization, the leading advocacy group, worked for decades to ban asbestos, which you would think we would have done that in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even in the early 2000s. And it wasn't until just a few years ago that we banned the use of asbestos in this country. The current administration has actively asked for a 30-month delay to study asbestos more. We've had rollbacks to things like PFAS limits that were really going to help in wastewater, rolling back toxic air pollutants that people breathe and children are exposed to every single day. So I am concerned, and that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, is to say, for all of the work that we need to do, we also need to make sure that the laws that we have passed in the last 2 decades hold firm
Yeah.
And this is where I want people to take a deep breath and, again, be willing to pick up the phone to call our elected officials, because the basic protections we do have, it's like I would have never thought I'd be talking about the asbestos ban being rolled back. It's like, if ever there was a substance that we could connect to harm, asbestos is one of those.
Well, we've had super fund sites and EPA things that have made people clean up their asbestos, and it's been left over by industrial use. I can't believe we're still, 2025, we're arguing about asbestos. Like, is it good or bad? Who knew? But yeah, I mean, this is the thing, folks. You've got to be engaged in your democracy, and everybody is a steward of that democracy. And yeah, regardless of whether you like who's in the White House, still, it just astounds me, because I don't have children, and I'd be losing my freaking mind if I had children right now, and seeing what's going on, because I give a shit about their future. I would. And I also would give a shit about what I'm putting in their bodies. I've had, one of the things that's kind of interesting to me, how much toxins are in like these chemicals that women use, because women are putting them all over their bodies. I've gone into my girlfriends when they're over the years, when they're, doing their makeup, spraying their hair and shit, and I'll start choking up in there, especially like the hairspray and stuff like that. And I'm just like, holy crap, honey, you're spending 2 hours in here a day, putting this stuff on your face. I don't even know how safe this is. And then you mentioned something that kind of triggered that, how much of that ends up in the womb with children and stuff. And, we see these higher rates of people on the spectrum and different things. And, there's always questions whether that's tied together, but, or those, whether correlation is causation or whatever. But still, I mean, you kind of have to wonder a little bit about some of it, because I've heard there's some really awful things in women's makeup.
Yeah, I think what the peer-reviewed research shows is that there are problematic chemicals that are used in beauty products, especially those that are designed for and targeted to Black women. So if you think about like synthetic hair braids, Consumer Reports just did a study of different carcinogenic chemicals that are commonly found in those. Skin lightening creams, for example, have been intentionally, mercury is used, again, toxic heavy metal is used as the actual lightening agent. Hair straightening, different treatments, for example. So a lot of these are Eurocentric beauty standards that are placed upon women of color, and then products that are highly toxic in order to address those. So there's a lot of different layers to unpack there, which is problematic. But at the end of the day, look, we've got various different toxic chemicals that are still allowed in beauty products. We've got stricter regulations over in the European Union than we currently still do here in the United States. Although we did, as I mentioned, make some good progress a couple years ago, there's still a lot of work to do, like allowing public transparency around those fragrance ingredients that I mentioned. But the science is pretty clear on a couple things. So like you mentioned autism, for example, there's actually not great peer-reviewed science showing a direct connection between the different chemicals that are used in makeup products and autism. So people kind of talk about that and sometimes like throw it around. And there's not strong science, but that doesn't mean there isn't an opportunity for us to remove these toxic chemicals, because we know there's an exploding market of a bunch of different companies that have really found a way to make the same beautiful lipstick, blush, mascara, whatever you want to wear without the toxic chemicals. So it's really a no-brainer. If I'm going to give you product A and product B, one that might have a carcinogen, one that might hurt your baby, and one that doesn't, you're going to choose the one that doesn't with the more studied ingredients. And so I think at the end of the day, sometimes speculation around different health effects can do harm in this conversation, because what we're really looking at is chronic disease, which things like neurodiversity is not a chronic disease. What we're looking at, if there's many different ways you could develop cancer in your lifetime. There's your genetics, there's the food you eat, there's where you live, and then there's environmental exposures like toxic chemicals in your home. This is one piece of the pie that we can remove from that overall risk, then we should. But ultimately, we're not going to be able to guarantee our health anyway. And we don't have a crystal ball, but it's certainly something that feels very common sense.
Yeah. I mean, the less is better. I mean, we're exposed to so much stuff through the air, through the environment. Your skin is like, a living, breathing organ. Is it your largest organ in your body? I think.
Yeah,
I flunked biology clearly, but we're just exposed to all this crap, and the less, the more. I learned this with eating. The food that I was putting in my body. I lost over 100 pounds, changing my diet, but also realizing how much chemicals are in there. One last question before we move to kind of some of the stuff you do on your website. I segued and I fucked it. It'll come back to me. Let's talk about what goes on with your website, some of the things you do offer there. So if people out in the environment want to hire you for speaking or advice, et cetera, they can take and do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I write weekly on Substack at Lindsay Dahl, and I also have a website, lindsay.to. I work by day as the Chief Impact Officer at Ritual, a supplement company, and I do everything from writing to speaking, and I give guest lectures. I was just lecturing at a couple different colleges and conferences. So if anyone's interested in really kind of understanding what the science does and does not say about this toxic chemical problem that we have, I'm here.
And so you do that by day. At night, are you Batwoman? No, I'm just...
No, at night is when I was writing this book, cleaning house.
That'll do it. You can do that in the spare time there. So I'm glad you're out there fighting. I'm glad you're out there educating. I think we've had some people on that have cosmetics that are designed to be more natural and more healthy. So if people are searching for that, they can Google that, or they can read your book, or both. You can do both and all that good stuff. I had a good question, and it's woohoo, just hit the farm there. But that's what old age does, folks. The dementia's kicking in. Call the funny farm for me. I'm ready to go. Thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Give us your .coms as we go out, and people can look you up on the internet.
Yep, lindsaydahl.com, and you can find me at Instagram at Lindsay_Dahl.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lindsay. Continued success with what you're doing.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And clearly I'm having a seizure, I guess. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1, the TikTokity. Oh, it's a crazy place on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe and bug your politicians, eh? Demand better. There you go.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a shirt. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.